Assalamualaikum YouTube viewers. Today in this video I am going to describe the time independent Schrodinger wave equation. So first of all, you need to consider an electron in an atom of mass m. Okay, the electron that has a mass m moving with velocity v. I have an electron that has a mass equal to m and velocity v. So its total energy will be equal to its kinetic energy plus its potential energy. Okay, so what will be its kinetic energy? Its kinetic energy, if I talk about, will be equal to T is equal to half mv square, as you have read about it. So if I multiply and divide the right hand side of the equation by m, what would happen? It would become half m square v square divided by m. So as you know that momentum has a formula P is equal to mv. The momentum has a formula P is equal to mv. So here I can write half p square divided by m, or I can write p square divided by 2m. So in place of total energy, can I write p square over 2m? Okay, so first of all, as you can see that my particle, if my particle is in 3 dimensions, then I can write it as p square x plus p square y plus p square z over 2m plus v. Okay, here v is my potential energy and this one is the kinetic energy. So now if I plug in the value of the operators, if px, py, pz are operators, then the value of px operator is equal to h over 2 pi iota curly over curly x. Okay, similarly py operator has a value h over 2 pi iota curly over curly y. Similarly pz operator has a value equal to h over 2 pi iota curly over curly z. So in place of this px square, py square, pz square, if I put this, so what will happen? First of all, here I am going to take 1 over 2m common. Taking 1 over 2m common, the rest of the equation looks like px square plus py square plus pz square plus v. Okay, so now I'm going to put in the values of the operator. So as you can see that here my total energy operator is known as the Hamiltonian operator. Okay, the total energy operator is known as the Hamiltonian operator. So in place of E, I am gonna write H as Hamiltonian operator. Okay, will be equal to 1 over 2m. Okay, the next thing is I'm going to plug in these values. In place of px square, I'm gonna write h over 2 pi iota curly over curly x square. Okay, the next thing is plus, in place of py, h over 2 pi iota curly over curly y square, and in place of pz I'm gonna write h over 2 pi iota curly over curly z square. Okay, and here is plus v, the potential energy. As you know, the potential energy v has an operator. The potential energy operator is equal to v, and that has a value similarly as equal to v. Okay, so I'm gonna write in place of v operator as similar v. So the next thing is you will take the square. Okay, taking the square, it will form h square divided by 2 square becomes 4, 1 over 2m. It will form h square divided by 2 square becomes 4, pi square becomes pi square, and iota square become iota square, and here it will form curly square over curly x square. Okay, so next thing is plus h square over 4 pi square iota square curly square divided by curly y square. Similarly the next thing, h over h square over 4 pi square iota square curly over curly z square plus v. So next thing, as you can see that h square over 4 pi square iota square is common in all of these, so I will take it out of the equation. My equation will become h square over 4 to the 8 pi square m iota square. Okay, since h square 4 pi square iota square has come out of this part of the equation, so the rest will remain curly square divided by curly x square plus curly square divided by curly y square plus curly square divided by curly z square plus v. Okay, as you know, the value of iota square, is equal to -1, so I am gonna write -1 here. Okay, so multiplying this -1, so the equation will become equal to minus 8 pi square m. So moving on, here this part of the equation, I can write it equal to Laplacian operator, that is represented by del square, okay, plus v. So the here del has a value equal to curly over curly x plus curly over curly y plus curly over curly z. Since it has square, so I can write it as del squared here. Okay, so here is our Hamiltonian operator. So if I replace Hamiltonian operator with energy E, I can write it as here minus 8 square over 8 pi square m v. Okay, so if I multiply psi on both sides, so what will happen? On multiplying psi on both sides, it will become E psi is equal to minus 8 square over 8 pi square m del square psi plus v psi. Now if I take these both to the left hand side of the equation, okay, so what will happen? As you can see, taking this part here, it will form h square over 8 pi square m del square psi, and here it is plus E psi, and this will form minus v psi equal to 0. So now if I take this answer of the Schrodinger wave equation, this part of the Schrodinger wave equation, and write it down on the next page here, 8 square over 8 pi square m del squared psi plus E psi minus v psi is equal to 0. So now on taking E psi towards the right hand side of the equation, this will form 8 square divided by 8 pi squared m del squared psi minus v psi is equal to minus E psi. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is taking minus common and psi common, taking minus common and psi common, 8 square over 8 pi square. If I've taken minus common, here it will form minus pi square m del squared, and this minus will become plus v minus E psi. This minus will cut down with this minus, and here this part is equal to the Hamiltonian operator, so I can write psi into Hamiltonian operator is equal to E psi, or I can write it as 8 psi is equal to E psi. So this is another form of the Schrodinger wave equation, the time independent Schrodinger wave equation. Okay, so moving on. So now I will take psi common from this part of the equation. Okay, now I will take psi common from this part, so the rest will be just like 8 square over 8 pi square m del square psi plus E minus v into psi is equal to 0. So next thing, I'm gonna multiply 8 pi square m and divide by h square on both sides. Okay, so doing this, multiplying by 8 pi square m and dividing by h square multiplied by this equation, this form of the equation, 8 square over 8 pi square m square psi, and also multiplying this with here, then 8 pi square m divided by 8 square, and the next thing is E minus v psi is equal to, since 0 multiplied by this form will be equal to 0. I have just multiplied 8 pi square m over h square by left hand side and right hand side. By multiplying this by left hand side, as you can see here, I have multiplied it by left hand side, and here was the plus, similarly plus is here, and this part is also multiplied by this part, and so the next thing is 0 multiplied by this. If I multiply this with 0, the answer will be equal to 0, so I have just written 0 here. So the next thing, 8 square will cut with this and this will cut with this. The answer will come out to be equal to curly square psi plus 8 pi square m over h square E minus v psi is equal to 0. So this is the familiar form of time independent Schrodinger wave equation. So that was all for today's lecture. Inshallah, see you in the next video.